2011 Eagles, this team was supposed to be unstoppable. Michael Vick was back, they had the league's top corner, and the front office called them the Dream Team. But that dream turned into a nightmare faster than anyone expected. Chemistry never clicked, the locker room felt divided, and the defense looked completely lost. Vick's magic from 2010 vanished behind a bad offensive line, and even worse, play calling. The talent was there. Deshaun Jackson, LaShawn McCoy, Jason Babin, but nobody knew their role. They blew late leads, fought internally, and finished 8-8. The same hype that lifted them up crushed them by December. Even Andy Reid, normally steady, looked exhausted by it all. The Dream Team label became a punchline, and the Eagles turned into the NFL's cautionary tale about believing your own headlines. It was star power without structure, and it showed exactly how fragile hype can be. 2008 Lions. The first team to go 0-16 didn't just lose, they collapsed in style. Every week, it looked like they were inventing new ways to lose games. Dan Orlovsky famously ran out of the back of the end zone. Calvin Johnson was wasting Hall of Fame talent, and the defense couldn't stop a sneeze. The offense was a revolving door of quarterbacks, none of them remotely ready for Sundays. Detroit's fans showed up out of loyalty, not hope. Even worse, they weren't tanking on purpose. They were genuinely trying. Every loss chipped away at morale until it felt like a comedy of errors. It was so historically bad that fans showed up wearing paper bags. The Lions didn't just hit rock bottom, they turned it into a home field. The silver lining? That disaster led to drafting Matthew Stafford, but at the time, it was pure football misery. 1999 Rams. They went from 4-12 nobodies to Super Bowl champions overnight. The story felt impossible. A backup grocery clerk named Kurt Warner stepping in and lighting up defenses like he'd been waiting his whole life. The offense was fast, flashy, and fearless. Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, and Torrey Holt turned turf into fireworks. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. The Rams scored so easily, it felt like a glitch in the league's coding, and it all came out of nowhere. No build-up, no slow rise, just an explosion of success. Even the uniforms looked too bright for how unstoppable they were, but that's what made it weird. It wasn't supposed to happen that fast. In 1 year, they went from irrelevant to legendary, creating a dynasty built on unpredictability. They called it the greatest show on turf, and for a while, it felt like football had changed forever. 2012 Jets. No team has ever looked more confused about what it wanted to be. They traded for Tim Tebow, but still started Mark Sanchez. That's like buying 2 steering wheels for 1 car. Sanchez melted down on national TV, butt fumbling his way into meme history, while Tebow barely played. The locker room was divided, the offense was an eyesore, and Rex Ryan's bravado couldn't save it. Every press conference felt like a reality show. The defense was solid, but the offense made sure none of it mattered. They finished 6-10, and by the end, everyone looked embarrassed to be there. It was chaos disguised as strategy. Even fans didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't just bad football, it was surreal entertainment. The Jets turned every week into a soap opera that forgot it was supposed to include touchdowns. 1985 Bears. They weren't just great, they were absurdly entertaining. From the Super Bowl shuffle music video to Buddy Ryan fighting with Mike Ditka, this team was chaos with shoulder pads. The defense was a nightmare for quarterbacks, led by the terrifying Mike Singletary and William the Refrigerator Perry. They blitzed like every down was personal. Quarterback Jim McMahon wore headbands with messages on them, punk rock before the NFL knew what that was. They crushed opponents, talked trash, and somehow stayed lovable. It was football meets entertainment TV, equal parts dominance and drama. They finished 15th and 1st, then bulldozed through the playoffs. The 1985 Bears were weird because they weren't just winning. They were performing. It was part football clinic, part carnival, and it worked. They became icons not just for how they played, but for how unapologetically bizarre they were while doing it. 2018 Jaguars. 1 year, they were 1 play away from the Super Bowl. The next, they were imploding on themselves. The defense was elite. Jalen Ramsey, Calais Campbell, Miles Jack. But the offense, led by Blake Bortles, was chaos incarnate. Ramsey openly called out other quarterbacks in interviews, while the offense couldn't even score 20 points. Bortles turned checkdowns into an art form. By mid-season, the locker room fractured, and what had looked like a dynasty in the making fell apart overnight. It gets crazier. The team's biggest highlight was a pre-game fight in London. They went from swaggering contenders to a cautionary tale faster than anyone expected. Jacksonville was over before it began, and the fall was just as dramatic as their rise. It was a reminder that attitude without consistency burns bright and dies fast. 2022 Broncos. Everything about this team screamed dysfunction. They traded for Russell Wilson, expected fireworks, and got static. The offense was so bad that "Let's Ride" became a national punchline. Head coach Nathaniel Hackett looked overwhelmed from week 1, mismanaging clocks, plays, and even field goals. Wilson looked lost, missing open receivers while Denver's defense kept begging for help. Games were torture. 12-9 scores, endless punts, and the occasional meltdown on the sideline. Fans were booing by midseason, players were yelling at each other, and the team's huge contract investment started to look like an anchor. They spent $245 million to score 16 points per game. It was supposed to be a Super Bowl push, but it turned into a cautionary tale about hype gone wrong. But first, only cool people are subscribed to this channel, so hit that subscribe button before we go any further. 1976 Buccaneers. The original expansion Buccaneers weren't just bad, they were historic. They went 0-14, got shut out 5 times, and didn't score a single touchdown until week 4. Coach John McKay's postgame quotes were legendary. When asked about his team's execution, he said, "I'm in favor of it." The players were basically strangers thrown together with no experience and no chemistry. Quarterbacks ran for their lives, wideouts couldn't catch, and the defense looked allergic to tackling. It wasn't just losing, it was artful chaos. Even their bright orange uniforms became a running joke. But somehow, fans loved them for it. They were endearingly terrible, like a sitcom version of a football team. By the end of the year, they hadn't just redefined failure, they made it unforgettable. The 1976 Buccaneers didn't just lose games. They built a legacy out of futility that still gets referenced today. 2007 Patriots. They weren't weird because they failed. They were weird because they almost didn't. The Patriots went 16-0, steamrolling everyone with video game offense. Tom Brady threw 50 touchdowns, Randy Moss caught 23 of them, and the team looked unbeatable. Then the Super Bowl happened. The Giants ruined perfection, and suddenly, the most dominant season ever became a curse. Every game had felt like a highlight reel, but that one loss turned it into a myth. So close to immortality, but forever incomplete. What made it stranger was how hated they were. Fans outside New England wanted them to lose. When they finally did, it felt like the league exhaled. That mix of dominance, arrogance, and collapse made the 2007 Patriots one of the most fascinating teams ever. They didn't just win, they rewrote expectations for what greatness could look like and how fragile it really is. 1998, Vikings. The 1998 Vikings were unstoppable until they weren't. Rookie Randy Moss turned defenses into memes before memes existed, pairing with Chris Carter and Randall Cunningham for an offense that looked unstoppable. They went 15-1, scored a then record 556 points, and made everything look easy. But in the NFC Championship, Gary Anderson, who hadn't missed a kick all season, missed one. That miss shattered everything. They lost in overtime, and the team never recovered emotionally. It was a football fairy tale that turned into heartbreak in one kick. The weird part wasn't their dominance. It was how fast it vanished. They were the most fun team in the league, then suddenly ghosts. The 1998 Vikings didn't just lose a game, they lost their place in history. One kick separated them from destiny, and it still haunts Minnesota decades later. 1987 Redskins. This team won with literal replacement players. During the NFL strike, the Redskins built a temporary roster full of unknowns and journeymen. And they didn't just survive, they thrived. Those replacements won all 3 games they played, including one against a Dallas team filled with regular starters who crossed the picket line. When the strike ended, the real starters returned, carried by the wins the replacements gave them. Washington ended up winning the Super Bowl that season, and those fill-ins became legends. It was one of the strangest championship runs in sports history, half the roster forgotten by the time the parade rolled through. Years later, they even made a movie about it. The 1987 Redskins proved that in football, anything can happen. Even anonymous players with day jobs can become heroes for a month and rewrite an entire franchise's destiny. 2015 Panthers. The Panthers played like a party you couldn't predict. Cam Newton was unstoppable, dabbing after every touchdown, dancing with teammates, and turning the field into a celebration. They went 15-1, with Newton winning MVP while the defense mauled opponents. It was charisma, swagger, and dominance in perfect sync. But when the lights were brightest, it all cracked. In the Super Bowl, the Denver defense wrecked them, and the team's confidence evaporated overnight. Newton's post-game press conference went viral for all the wrong reasons. and just like that, the magic was gone. What made them weird wasn't the loss. It was how fast they shifted from invincible to invisible. They were a cultural phenomenon for one season, then vanished. The 2015 Panthers showed how fragile dominance can be when the fun stops. One season, all flash, no encore. 1994 Raiders. This team felt like a rock band mid-breakdown. They had talent, Jeff Hostetler, Tim Brown, and a defense that could hit, but the locker room was pure chaos. Al Davis ran the show his way, changing coaches and philosophies like outfits. The team fought constantly, players got suspended, and every week felt like a new headline. Yet somehow, they still won 9 games. It was like watching a car on fire win a race. The Raiders were unpredictable and unapologetic. Off-field drama, sideline shouting, and highlight reel plays all blended into one bizarre season. They weren't a bad team, just one that couldn't decide what it wanted to be, elite or insane. The 1994 Raiders proved that dysfunction can still entertain, and that Al Davis's chaos was both the engine and the explosion. Silver and black has never looked weirder. 2001 Patriots. Before they became a dynasty, they were a fluke. Drew Bledsoe went down early, a 6th-round pick named Tom Brady stepped in, and the rest is history. But back then, it didn't make sense. A backup quarterback leading an average roster to the Super Bowl, nobody saw it coming. The Patriots weren't dominant. They were scrappy, defensive, and weirdly lucky. They upset the Rams, celebrated with confetti still in disbelief, and unknowingly started one of the greatest runs in sports. What made it strange was how improbable it all felt. No one thought Brady was special yet. No one expected a dynasty. It was supposed to be a one-off miracle. That underdog team turned out to be the beginning of something much bigger, but in the moment, it was pure shock. The NFL didn't know it, but history had just shifted. 1978 Oilers. The Oilers were unlike anything the league had seen. Their fans chanted "Love Ya Blue" and packed the Astrodome for pep rallies that felt more like rock concerts. They didn't win the Super Bowl, but they inspired a cult following that treated losses like celebrations. Led by Earl Campbell, football's most unstoppable running back, they played with emotion that bordered on reckless. The team was physical, loud, and fun to watch. They became a symbol of Houston's pride, even after heartbreak against Pittsburgh year after year. What made them weird was how much fans loved them for failing courageously. They weren't champions, but they were legends of heart. The 1978 Oilers showed that sometimes being memorable matters more than being perfect. Their legacy wasn't about trophies. It was about love, loyalty, and chaos wrapped in baby blue. If you like this video, consider watching this next one, which YouTube thinks you are going to really love.